good evening, or whatever time it happens to be for you. As some of you may be aware, in addition to this YouTube channel, I'm also a co-host of the Do You Like Scary Movies podcast, where we talk to some of the most interesting people in the world, horror authors, artists, filmmakers, and so forth. If they're involved in horror, we like to talk to them. To bring you something a little bit different, I've arranged to play one of our recent episodes for you here on YouTube. In this one, we talk to horror author and historian Lisa Morton. So I hope you enjoy. If you do enjoy it, you'll find a link to the podcast down in the video description so you can find all of our episodes. Now I'm going to turn things over to my podcasting alter ego. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled video content next time, but until then, take care and stay scared.
Welcome to Do You Like Scary Movies, where we examine all things horrific. Each episode features interviews with those involved in all aspects of horror and the bizarre. Do you like creepy movies, scary books, or horror music? Join us for a look into all of the things that go bump in the night and bring a chill to your spine. Prepare to be scared.
All right, welcome to another episode of our favorite podcast.
And hopefully yours as well.
Exactly. I am your co-host, Brian, the Rocky Mountain paranormal guy into all things spooky and scary and paranormal horror. Also the co-host of the They Did It podcast if you're into conspiracy stuff. And now I'll hand it over to Bob, my co-host.
I'm tempted to just say ditto, but my name's Bob instead of Brian, and instead of They Did It, I have the Phobophile YouTube channel, but otherwise, really very much the same. Also with Rocky Mountain Paranormal, writer, magician, and all-around spooky kind of guy.
Exactly.
All the best people are.
We have a really cool author guest today. I think she's really our first author. I mean, we've had people that are
We've had
writers.
people who have written. I mean, there were, Joe Netter started as an author, but he was on to talk about screenwriting.
He's done other things, though. I think she's our first sole author.
Yeah, she's done some screenwriting as well, but she's known as an author.
Exactly.
I guess we should tell you who we're talking about. We're talking about Lisa Morton, author of fiction and nonfiction, including some spooky histories.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure she can tell you more about all of that.
So what do you say we get her on the phone?
Sounds like a fine idea.
Cool. Let's do it.
Hey, hi there.
Hello.
Hello.
It sounds like we have a real voice and recording going and everything. It's like we know what we're doing once in a while.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, I guess...
So, introductions first, I suppose. This is Bob.
Hey, Bob.
How's it going?
It's going okay.
Good.
I would say this isn't Bob, but that's just funny. I'm Brian, the co-host of the show.
Hey,
And
hi, Brian.
Good to meet you. And for those people who have no idea who, since we've introduced ourselves, who you are, why don't you give us a brief intro?
My name is Lisa Morton. I am a writer. I call myself a reformed screenwriter. I write books now, mainly short stories, nonfiction and fiction both. My most recent book, which just came out 2 days ago, is a book I co-edited that is a collection of classic horror stories called Haunted Tales. And I co-edited that with Leslie S. Klinger.
Yep. In fact, we have a copy sitting on our table. It just came from Amazon just this afternoon. My copy did.
Oh, you are ahead of me. I actually don't have a copy yet.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet because it just came this afternoon. Although I've read some of the stuff in it because it's classics.
You should be done by now.
I had to work.
That's no excuse. where should we go from here?
I guess one of the things that I have found most interesting in your work, I suppose we should talk about, is the history books. You have the history of Halloween called Trick or Treat. You have Calling the Spirits, a history of seances. So how did you get into writing the spooky histories?
I have always loved writing nonfiction. It's kind of like a big treasure hunt for me, digging out these facts and then assembling them into a linear presentation and finding those connections and so forth. My first nonfiction book was actually a film book about a Hong Kong director named Choi Hawk. And after I finished that book, the publisher of that book said to me, "Hey, do you want to do another book?" And so I looked at things that they had put out recently, and they had just done something called the Christmas Encyclopedia. So I said to them, "Hey, what do you think about doing a Halloween Encyclopedia?" And they loved that idea. And so the first of my sort of history folklore books was the Halloween Encyclopedia, and I amassed so much information researching that book that it was easy to roll that over into other Halloween history books. And then the others have just come from there. I've done a history of ghost and the seance history book.
Interesting. And I think what a lot of people may not realize is just how much there is to know about these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. The seance one was a really almost a pleasant surprise to me when I agreed to do that. The idea was actually pitched to me from an editor I had worked with. And at first I was kind of like, okay, well, I hope there's enough information there. And it was so easy and so interesting. It turned out to be a massive amount of information that I had to kind of decide a few things to leave out, and it was fascinating, and I got really lucky with that because much of the history of seances centers around a movement in the 19th century called spiritualism, and there is an online archive of spiritualist materials that is mind-blowing, that has thousands of the original newspapers and magazines and so forth from like 1870 on. And it was so interesting to go read these actual accounts of what people were doing in seances then, and just to see what it was like for them and how different it was from the way we experience seances now.
Yeah, different and the same, because we're also with the Rocky Mountain Paranormal Research Society, so we're sort of in that world as well. And one of the things I've noticed is...
you just dropped a bomb on her there.
Yeah. But one of the things that I've noticed that's interesting to me is everything looks very different in terms of ghost hunting versus Victorian seances, but they're still kind of doing the same things, just with different clothing, different technology.
Well, that's something I keep bringing up to people. I'm like, if you're watching a ghost hunting television show or you're doing it yourself, you're kind of doing a seance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In fact, I have a theory about the modern paranormal investigation, and by the way, that is awesome that you guys are members of that group, is derived from the scientific side of the 19th century spiritualist movement and the seances, because they actually believed at that point that spiritualism, which was a religion to them, was the only religion that could be proven scientifically. And it didn't matter to them that it was continuously disproven. But that notion that it could be proven scientifically and that they were employing these interesting gadgets to do that and so forth, to me, ends up becoming the modern paranormal investigation way down the line. And then the other side of the 19th century seance, which was the mediumship, the sort of personal experience, becomes the modern psychic.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, using a lot of the same, in the fraudulent, the knowingly fraudulent side, using a lot of the same tricks, just with different wrapping paper.
Yeah, and the 19th century mediums, many of them were physical mediums, and that kind of died out by the early 20th century just because that was way easier to disprove.
Yeah, you turn on the lights and you catch them.
Yeah, I haven't
Exactly.
seen ectoplasm in a long time, so. Not that I don't want to, but yeah, that's been one thing that's kind of interesting me in your books, is I actually hosted a theatrical seance for 5 or 6 years and really had to dive into the history and find all of the things that were practiced then and how to bring it up to date so we could have a modern seance but still have the feel of that classic seance. And yeah, unfortunately, that's another piece of history that's being lost, is, you know, the spiritualism, the beliefs of the past. And I'm glad somebody's out there documenting it so we do have records of it.
Yeah, it was certainly a really interesting movement, and I think when people hear about seances in the 19th century, they immediately go to our sort of modern horror movie idea of a seance. And when you read the accounts from people who were actually attending these things at the time, they were like full of joy at these events. They were not spooky to them. They were like one part magic show, one part revivalist meeting, and one part party. And they sound really fun when you read them now. And even people who were skeptics would talk about, well, I didn't really believe any of it, but it sure was fun.
Exactly.
And that's kind of where we're coming from, and from the horror side as well. It's like, we're horror people. It's a horror podcast we're doing, so. Obviously, we're coming from that angle, but we've dug deeper and found the less creepy side in the history as well.
Yeah, one thing we should tell her, there's a special thing about this podcast tonight. So back in, we all know Lilydale. I'm assuming we all know.
Present company, although we should probably explain for the listeners.
Lilydale was the community built by mostly the Fox sisters who started spiritualism, as a place that's kind of a go-to of all of your paranormal needs. You can have your cards read, you can have a seance, you can have a psychic reading.
And it's in New York.
It's just outside of New York.
Still active as far as I know.
It is still active. I got an email from them today.
Okay.
So I know that they're still there.
But they go all the way back.
They go way back. And the reason I brought that up is in 1904, in the main auditorium, they replaced a lot of their old seance tables. They updated, and I got lucky enough that the table that we use for our show is one of the original got rid of in 1904 seance tables.
Wow.
So yeah, broadcasting about spiritualism from one of the seance tables.
From one of the tables, yeah.
That's incredible.
So yeah, we dig the subject.
Yeah, this the room. Unfortunately, this is just audio rather than video, but the room in which we record these is like a museum of paranormal, spiritualism, horror stuff, anything kind of creepy is in this room.
Yeah, and it gives it a special vibe to the show. But how long ago did that book come out?
The seance book?
Yeah, that was just 2 years ago.
Yep, 2020. I couldn't remember.
That is one that I have to go buy now. I can't. I'm on my phone right now.
Yeah, I can endorse that book. That one I have read, and that's an excellent book. Even for somebody like me who, well, I know this stuff pretty well, but even for me, there were some things that I didn't know.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that you enjoyed it and that you already know the subject, so that's really nice.
And of the things that I did know, you got them right, so that's also good.
Yay!
So you're doing a little QA on the way through the book. Gotcha.
But I also wanted to ask about the Halloween history. Since you've written so much about the history of Halloween, what do you think about the way Halloween is celebrated now? Is it changing a lot? I've noticed fewer trick-or-treaters, but I've noticed a lot of people doing decorations and things, so as a historian of the subject, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's such an interesting holiday because it is always changing. I mean, it would be virtually unrecognizable to someone from 100 years ago at this point, or maybe even 60 years ago. And it definitely is changing again right now. And the trick or treating thing is interesting because it feels like it's not that it's going away, but that it's going in different directions. Like here in LA, everybody descends on 2 or 3 neighborhoods. And if you try to go to those neighborhoods on Halloween night, I mean, it will take you like 2 hours to go 3 blocks because they're just jam packed. And it's interesting. I'm not sure if that's like a class thing that's happening now or what. They're definitely wealthier, more affluent neighborhoods, and people are driving from all over the city to bring their kids to these neighborhoods. And that I've had friends tell me that that's exactly what's going on in their parts of the country. So that seems to be something that's happening more now. And in terms of, decorations, certainly things like the Spirit Halloween stores have made home haunts much more affordable and doable.
And Home Depot is sort of winning that battle this year, I think.
Indeed, yes. I got my 12-foot skeleton this year.
I got mine last year.
I feel left out.
I pre-ordered early this year to get one.
Yeah, you had to be on top of that. Like, I wasn't looking for a new one, but I was sort of following, and they were gone in a couple hours.
They were, yeah. I actually had a bunch of friends who knew I desperately wanted one, and I got several of them alerted me the instant those things went on sale, and I was like, bang, got one.
Well, congratulations. Have you actually got it yet, or is it still in transit?
Yeah, no, we got it. We haven't opened the box yet. I mean, the box is gigantic.
Yeah, the box is like a 4-foot cube.
It is. Yeah, it's huge.
I had to build a shed for it.
Yeah, it's sitting on my back patio, taking up a whole ton of room right now.
Yep. Did you get the original or the Inferno Pumpkinhead one?
They didn't have the Inferno when I ordered. I just got the original.
Yeah, that's what I have as well.
I am amazed at these giant creations that they're coming out with, but at the same time, being a Halloween junkie as it is, it's amazing seeing this happen. So like you were saying, it made it a lot more economical for people to be able to do their own home haunts, and I am so happy with that. And not only do they do it, but they do it with better quality.
Right.
Things that were only available to professional decorators or professional haunts. Now I can get something that's not as good, but still
pretty good,
reasonable, and it doesn't break the bank.
Yeah, like the giant skeletons are a few $100. If you had wanted something like that 50 years ago, you would have had to hire a professional haunt designer, and it would have cost orders of magnitude more.
Well, and some of the things like the projections for windows. I mean, these are things that even the professionals haven't been using that long. And thanks to technology, we have all sorts of really amazing things.
We do, yeah. We do just a more of an extensive yard display than a true haunt here at my house, and I am such a fan of the projections. I love the way they look, and they're so easy to do now, and the projectors are cheap. So I mean, you can get a really good system that will project ghosts and all kinds of stuff now for $100. It's really fun and crazy. So yeah, we just love that. The as they call them, the digital decorations.
Exactly. Now I will ask. We're kind of talking about the fun and the exciting and the parts of Halloween that we all love to do. How has the other side of Halloween's perspective gone, where people have been afraid of it? People were trying to ban it. People were kind of protesting against it. Is that still happening?
There is still definitely that side of it out there. I mean, every year I see church celebrations where they replace Halloween with either Harvest Festival or there was one Christian school a couple of years ago that actually did something called Hallelujah Day. Yeah, so that still obviously is in effect.
And I've noticed some of the churches will set up their own hell houses, which they look like haunted houses, but then they have religious messaging as you go through.
The first one in the country was over in Arvada,
yeah.
And we went and took the tour. That was really interesting because it was more of a don't do any of this or you're going to burn forever. But they showed it to you instead.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh yeah,
there's actually a new movie coming out on some Christian network. I think it's called Journey to Hell or Journey into Hell or something. That's a film version of the same thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, you kind of walked out of this thing with PTSD because it's like, I just watched a murder and a drunk driving accident that killed somebody and all of these things, and they played it straight. There was no jump scare. There was no ghost. It was just these horrible things they kept showing you. Now, admittedly, they did a good job.
They do. There's a fantastic documentary from about 15 years ago that was called Hell House.
Yep.
That was all about putting one of these on, and it's one of my all-time favorite documentaries. I just love it. And I mean, it's the one that has like the incredible scene where they tell somebody to paint a pentacle and they paint a Star of David. I mean, just...
It's a star,
I also noticed, not from the religious perspective, but during the pandemic, there was a lot of, you can't go trick-or-treating for pandemic reasons. So there's...
Right. And my answer was, you're wearing a mask.
Yeah, you're wearing a mask anyway, but but it comes from different directions.
Yeah, and, going back to what you were saying about the different neighborhoods, I have a neighborhood not too terribly far from where I live that is very, very... upper class, I'm going to say. The homes start in the $7 million range. And, yeah, during Halloween, it's packed. And
interesting.
Last year we went and looked, and it was interesting because they weren't walking the children from house to house. They were golf carting them from house to house.
That's what I have a problem with. Not necessarily the golf cart part of it, but the fact that the parents are taking the children trick-or-treating instead of saying, here's your costume, here's your candy bag, be back by 10 o'clock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For a lot of children, that's a formative experience, and I think it's an important one that's being lost.
It is. It's a rite of passage that you go out and try and get away with stupid things on Halloween. I still do that as an adult. It's just stupider things, I guess.
Yeah, when I got my bank account, my capacity for stupid just went through the roof.
I agree that special night when you were a kid and you got to dress up as something that you wanted to be, that was already a fantasy that you were play acting, and then you got to go out and take on the world and face imaginary fears, or maybe even some real fears, the scary porch that you would have to walk up to or whatever. And by the time you were done, you felt so empowered. I mean, you would just be, at 7, you would just have this incredible feeling for the whole next month or whatever, just from that one night. And that was, I think, a wonderful experience for kids. And I agree that it's too bad that now the parents have to be there, so the child no longer gets to have that sense of independence and empowerment.
And when do you think that started to change and go awry?
Well, I think that came around with mainly in the 1970s is when we kind of see trick or treat is undergoing a big evolution at that point. And it's a combination of things. Part of it is that there are counterculture groups that are coming along that are now claiming the holiday for adults again. So you get these things like pagan groups and LGBTQ groups and so forth that are kind of reclaiming the holiday. And then there are the urban legends about the poison candy and so forth, all essentially unfounded. And then, of course, in 1978, we get the release of Halloween. And suddenly Halloween seems like a completely dangerous, scary thing for adults.
Oh, okay. So, one of my favorite movies, but maybe some unintended consequences there.
Right, exactly. And also one of my favorite movies.
And I also think there's just a general cultural shift, not necessarily related to Halloween specifically, but more parents have become increasingly overprotective in a way that I don't think is at all productive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking about as you were talking about how the children, kind of got to go up to the house all by themselves, and it was kind of a unique experience for them. I think another, study book that I don't think has been done is on the urban legend of the soul house in the neighborhood that was haunted. We all had one.
Particularly if you're in a small town.
Exactly. There was always
even in the city, there are maybe not a house in the neighborhood, but at least a place.
Yeah, there was a house somewhere that the kids wouldn't go to because it's haunted, and or there was some sort of a killer that lived there, or
the crazy old woman in the house, or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, it's been featured in so many books or movies as a plot line.
Yeah, books and movies.
But I don't think anybody's ever actually done any research into it. And I think that there's a huge piece of urban legend that belongs in there.
It's an interesting idea.
It is interesting. And I grew up here in L.A., and so it was like a very urban setting. And we didn't have any rundown houses that we thought were haunted, but we definitely had the neighbors who we were convinced were psycho and crazy.
You had
and in LA you've got some other haunted places, maybe not houses in the neighborhood, but some of the famous haunted hotels. And
that's true. Well, and you have the legends. It's like, don't go to that house. That's where the witch lives. Or the local neighborhood house where all of the children disappear into. It seems that every neighborhood, every city had these. Yeah, there definitely needs to be. Like I say, I don't know if it's a book or a study, but
I don't know. I'm not sure how much there is in terms of research other than just sort of collecting the stories. But I imagine there's something.
Call 1,000 of your friends and write a book. That's really what write a book is most of the time, I think, isn't it? Just especially these history ones. I mean, it's just the amazing collecting of the history.
Yeah, sifting through all of the old materials and so forth.
Yeah. So actually, that leads me to an interesting question. Do you have a particular method for finding the materials, sorting the materials, choosing what to include, what not to include, or how do you approach digging into such a large topic and figuring out how to turn it into a coherent book?
Well, I'll usually start with finding what are the closest books that have already been done on the subject, and I will read those books. And from there, I start working through actually the bibliographies on those books. So I will start by reading, say one history of spiritualism, and then I go down their bibliography and I find other things that look interesting, and then it becomes like this rabbit hole where you just keep and then you dig out the bibliography on the next one and you follow that and you just keep kind of following it back. And then occasionally, now there is so much great information online. When I did the first one, the Halloween Encyclopedia, it was actually just before everything was digitized and came online, so it just involved endless visits to libraries.
Which is another experience that I think people ought to have that nobody has anymore, but that's a whole other rant.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for
going into the stacks or the restricted room where they have the rare books and spend some quality time in the library. I think,
or the microfilm,
or even worse, or better.
Oh yeah, there definitely is. Although the one big advantage I will tell you from experience to the digitized versions of things is searching.
yes,
Because when I was doing the Halloween Encyclopedia way back in the early 2000s, you would be at the library and you'd find some incredible old folklore book that's like 800 pages long and has no index, and you're like, I know something good in here. I just know it. And nowadays all I have to do is bring that book up on archive.org or Google Books or whatever, and just type in whatever I'm searching for, and bang, I've got it 10 seconds later.
And just the availability of materials, because the odds of your local library having the particular volume that you need to track down this obscure citation.
exactly.
And then you're going to have to get interlibrary loan, or nobody in the library system has it, and then you've got to track down a copy from rare books dealers or whatever. There are certainly advantages to being online.
And there are advantages to living in a place like LA, because we do have incredible libraries here. I also have a massive instant resource in my day job. I actually am a used bookseller. And I work in one of LA's biggest used and rare bookstores. And we just have nonstop incredible stuff coming through that store all the time. And in fact, there are illustrations in my history of Ghost book that I was able to scan beautiful high-res copies out of, like these 19th century books that we had come through the store.
Now, I do have a technical question. How can you work at a place like that and still have a paycheck?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
I could not do that.
See, back in the day when I was a teenager, I worked at just a regular bookstore, not a rare bookstore, just a regular run-of-the-mill bookstore. And there were pay periods that I ended owing them money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would... I'd run out of room and money really quick.
Yeah, I've spent my entire life running out of room and money.
That's true.
It's definitely perilous. One of my little tricks for dealing with it is that if I come across a book that I absolutely love, but it's like, I probably really shouldn't buy this, I will offer it to a bunch of friends and let one of my friends buy it. So at least then I know where it is. And
yeah, every once in a while I see you post one of those on Facebook, and I reach for my pocketbook, and then usually I manage to stop myself.
Right.
So, with all of that behind us here, what are your next adventures in writing?
There is a huge book I am working on right now, which I'm not supposed to reveal yet, but I can't tell you that it is my first big coffee table art book.
Ooh.
And that is something I had always wanted to do, so this is a real bucket list item for me, and it's a really, really cool subject. I was brought in as a sort of hired gun on this. They came to me and said, hey, we've got a deal on this. Do you want to write this book for us? And it was like, oh, yes, I do. And it's been interesting because putting together a book like this is very different from anything I've done before. You actually start by gathering the illustrations. And this called for 600 illustrations. So I delivered the list of illustrations in March, and the reason they have to get that first is because it takes them so long to clear copyright on all of the illustrations.
That makes sense.
So right now I'm in a little bit of a holding pattern because I have now delivered all of the text for the book, and we are just waiting for the picture editors, they're called, to get back and let us know what has been cleared so far, so we can start doing the layout and the captions. The captions are actually an immense part of one of these books, and in fact I am actually contracted to deliver 27,000 words of captions.
Wow.
That's a short book in and of itself.
Right. So I'm kind of chomping at the bit right now to get on to the captions, but I have to hold myself back until I know what's been cleared.
You know, you may have encountered something. I've had a question about our one of our local libraries has a project where they've digitized a ton of old I'll say 1930s photographs. You know, just anything and everything from around the state. Mm-hmm. And since they've digitized them, they've copyrighted them.
Oh.
And you cannot use the image without the payment to the library system. And I wondered if you'd encountered that, because I always questioned if that was possible. I mean, they didn't, or there's no origin from them with the photograph. I understand maybe they own the scan.
Right.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
That is a weird one. There are book companies that did this with Google Books, and it's one of the reasons that Google Books used to be a fantastic resource and is not so much anymore, because there were companies who came in and took like a book that was published in, say, 1910 and put out their own version of it and then said, we own the copyright on that. You can't have it anymore, Google Books. And Google Books just tended to remove those really instantly. And I think they have since gone back and put some of them back. But my understanding, and I'm not a copyright lawyer, but what I think is the case with these things is if you take an existing book and you add, say, your own footnotes to it or your own introduction or whatever, you can say you own that part. But
you own the transformation, but not the original work.
Right, and I think you're probably right in the case of these photographs. That I mean, I have to say, I question even being able to own a scan. Maybe that is possible. I don't know.
That seems
pushing the limit a little.
That seems sort of on the edge.
Yeah.
But maybe that's what it is. That if you manage to track down the original, but then on the other hand, they probably have the original.
Well, yeah, they own the original at that point. So. Yeah, that's just a bizarre one that I've always kind of questioned, but I'd never seen anybody encounter it.
I wonder if it's just a matter that nobody's ever bothered to challenge it.
That's a possibility.
Because Disney tries that with some stuff too. Didn't Disney copyright the Happy Birthday song? And then just nobody challenged it for a while or something like that?
Somebody did. Honestly, I think the funniest copyright one that I ever saw, there was an Indiana Jones board game that came out back in the early 80s, and they copyrighted the word Nazi. Was actually in the game, and every time it said Nazi, it had a little copyright symbol next to it. I'm like, why would you do that?
Wow.
It's desperation to hold on to everything, I think.
Or they just figured somebody would get wind of it and write that into the papers, and that would be their advertising.
Yeah, get a little free advertising out of it. That's possible. Because wow.
That was a weird.
Yeah, that was an odd segue.
A weird turn.
we don't script anything, and that's what happens.
Yeah, we take a lot of weird turns on this show.
Yes, we do. So, what books have we not mentioned?
Well, we haven't talked much about the fiction.
That's true.
Yeah,
so tell us about your fiction.
Yeah, I love fiction. My favorite writing thing is short stories. I love short stories. I have published about 160 now, I think. The most recent one is in a really cool anthology called Classic Monsters Unleashed that just came out. It was a thing where the editor approached me and said, hey, I'm going to do this book where we're going to do sort of updated versions of classic monsters, and would you be interested in writing one on the Headless Horseman? And I said, oh, yeah. So, yeah, I have a very strange story called Hacking the Horseman's Code, which has been getting some really nice reviews, which is about a near future in which Halloween audio animatronic figures have taken the next step and are actually powered by AIs. And a Headless Horseman figure has developed an unhealthy obsession with fear.
Cool.
I like that.
I'm gonna have to track that anthology down. That sounds like right up my alley.
It's a really good book, and it actually, I think, is the most successful anthology ever funded through Kickstarter. It was just gigantically successful. And the people who did it are doing one right now called Shakespeare Unleashed. And I will have a story in that, which is based on Shakespeare's Gorefest Titus Andronicus. And that was really interesting to write.
And for those of you listening who don't know Titus Andronicus, go pick up the complete works of Shakespeare
Exactly.
and study, and then come back and talk to us some more.
Yeah, it's a fairly astonishing play. I mean, it rivals any slasher movie I can think of. It's got people having their hands cut off. At least I think 2 people have their hands cut off. The young female lead has her tongue ripped out. There are children baked into a pie and served to their mother. I mean, it's really astonishing.
It's a horror story.
Well, and Shakespeare did a lot of horror.
Shakespeare did a lot of horror that people forgot was horror. I've talked extensively about Macbeth as...
You just said Macbeth on the show.
I do not believe in the curse, and I will say Macbeth again. Macbeth. But, it's a supernatural horror thriller.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've done 4 novels at this point. I have 2 novellas coming out soon. I don't have another novel in the works. Novels are increasingly hard for me to write somehow. Just there's such a huge expenditure of time, and I seem to always have other deals in the way. Yeah,
I've got 2 or 3 half-finished novels sitting on my computer, just waiting for me to get back to them. So I get it.
Right. Yeah. But the novellas will be really fun. One will be Halloween themed. That'll be out from a really good publisher called Crystal Lake Publishing. And
I know them. They're a good press.
Yeah, it's nice. It's actually going to be in a collection with 2 other Halloween novellas by 2 other female writers who are really good.
Are you allowed to say who?
They will be Lucy Snyder, who is a multiple Bram Stoker award-winning author, and Kate Maruyama, who is another LA native here, who's a good friend and a fantastic writer.
Cool. I know Lucy Snyder. I don't know the other one, but sounds like a good project.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that to come out.
Yeah, and we'll be looking forward to that.
Cemetery Dance, which is another wonderful small press, although they're almost like a mid-list press at this point. They're fairly big. Just announced that I will have a novella out from them next year called Placarita, and that is co-written with a writer named John Palisano.
Okay, yeah. I know John as well.
Yeah.
Cool. And do you have official release dates for anything, or are they just coming soon, sort of nebulously?
I think the Halloween novellas will be out, or at least will be announced very shortly and should be out by October. The Placarita, I think, was announced as a December 2023 release. And I'm guessing that the big coffee table book I'm working on right now, I think is intended for a fall 2023 release as well.
So save up on money for the end of next year is what you're saying. Okay. Gotcha. Already working on that.
Yeah.
All that being said, it looks like we're hitting the, as they say, the top of the hour. So if people are interested in who you are, what you've got, want to buy your things, what can they do? How can they find you?
The easiest place to start is lisamorton.com, and from there you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook, or sign up for my author newsletter. I do a monthly newsletter. I love doing the newsletter, and it's full of all kinds of crazy little articles and little funny news tidbits and all kinds of stuff. So that's one of my favorite ways for people to follow me.
Cool.
Excellent. Well, make sure y'all do that.
Absolutely. I will go sign up in a minute.
Great.
That being said, it was great meeting you, great conversation, and maybe we'll have you on next year after these come out and we can talk about some new books.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Sounds
like
good.
fun.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on, and
thanks.
talk to you then.
All right, great. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yay. She was a good interview. I liked her.
Yeah. Interesting books, too.
I really, really, really need to read the seance one. Morbid curiosity more than anything else. But we actually have a guest for next week.
We do indeed.
We do indeed. Mr. Larry Blameyer. Amazing at everything he does. He's working on a new series of paintings, I see.
Author, artist, filmmaker.
Yeah. Wordsmith. He does it all. So, I guess we should take off till next week, and don't forget to tune in because
make sure you tune in for that one.
Cool.